Hi, I'm Cameron. My mother tried to hand over the $3.2 billion fashion empire my grandmother built to my brother, just because he was louder, just because he was a man. They told the board I was unstable, they leaked fake videos, they even forged a signature. But the worst betrayal? It came from the people who once called me family. Why would a mother destroy her daughter's future and call it love? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I really want to know. The city never really sleeps, but tonight Manhattan felt quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath for me. I stood at the edge of the penthouse balcony, barefoot, arms wrapped tight around my chest. Below, the streets pulsed with light and energy, and above, the sky pressed in with a kind of stillness that felt expectant. My reflection shimmered in the floor-to-ceiling glass behind me, older than I remembered. Maybe it was the lighting, or maybe it was betrayal. Inside, the dining room was staged like a scene out of a fashion editorial. White orchids, champagne, everything perfect, cold. My mother never missed a chance to perform. "You've always been creative, Cam," Vivian had said earlier over seared scallops, her voice dipped in sugar and arsenic. "But leadership? That's something you grow into." I'd nodded, not because I agreed, because I knew better than to take the bait. Especially with Travis smirking over his wine glass, his tie too tight, posture too smug. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and excused myself. They think I'm soft because I don't explode. They mistake restraint for weakness. But I learned silence from the strongest woman I've ever known. My grandmother, the founder of Maison Delacroix, the real reason any of us are here. 16 years ago, I'd sat cross-legged on her bedroom rug as she brushed out her silver hair and said, "Don't fight like them, win like you." I never forgot that. Tonight, though, tonight tested every ounce of that restraint. It started with dinner, turned ambush. Vivian raised her glass, tapped it for silence, then looked at me like she was doing me a favor. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she said. "We've decided to reconsider the will's execution. For your own good. Emotional instability at the time. Well, it's grounds." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You were grieving, darling," she continued casually. "That's not the state of mind to lead a $3.2 billion brand." "And Travis?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from cracking. Was he grieving less? Travis grinned. "I've been through Wharton. I know how to run a boardroom. People trust me." People or Mom? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My jaw locked while my fingers dug into the fabric of my dress. She slid a folder across the table. "You'll step aside gracefully. It'll be easier for everyone. No rage, no tears, just ice." Later, alone in my room, I sat cross-legged like I used to, my laptop open beside me. An anonymous email had landed in my inbox. No subject line. It read, "They're planning to name Travis interim CEO. You were never supposed to find out." Attached was a list of names, board members, ones I trusted, ones who'd supposedly pledged their support. Apparently not. I scrolled down. The last line hit like a slap. "She's been courting them for weeks." I stared out at the skyline again, suddenly feeling like the city didn't belong to me anymore. Travis, my mother, the empire my grandmother built with blood, grit, and brilliance, now being carved up like leftover cake. But I wasn't done yet. On the nightstand sat an envelope I'd never dared to open until now. Grandmother's handwriting looped across the front. I tore the seal. Inside was a letter, succession instructions, handwritten and unfiltered. She'd named me, without doubt, without hesitation, and she'd added in blue ink, "They will test you, child. Let them. Fire tempers gold." I smiled. Let them come. If they wanted war, I'd give them couture combat. My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., but I was already awake. I had barely slept. Again. I stood at the window, still in my robe, watching the light begin to bleed across the skyline. Somewhere out there, someone was betting I'd fall apart today. I sipped my coffee slowly, bracing for the board meeting ahead. My pitch was rehearsed, strategic, bulletproof. But as I glanced at the mirror while fixing my blouse, a flicker of doubt crept in. Not fear, something heavier. Like standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing if the wind behind you is encouragement or betrayal. "You belong here," I told myself. She knew it. You know it. My phone buzzed. It was Liv, my assistant. Her voice sounded tight, urgent. You need to see this, now. A link, no subject. The video began before I could sit down. It showed me, in the atelier, yelling at one of our seamstresses. The audio was sharp, harsh. My voice rose, accusing, relentless. But I knew that day, I remembered it. The seamstress had broken down in tears because she'd been publicly humiliated by another exec, Vivian's appointee. I had stepped in, furious. Not at her, at him. But in this video, the context was gone. Spliced, trimmed. It looked like I was the abuser. The comment section was a wildfire. This is the future CEO? Yikes. She's unstable. Imagine treating staff like that. I felt like someone had lit a match under my skin. My phone buzzed again. A text from a longtime client. We're holding off on the upcoming launch. Need to evaluate. They were already backing away. And then came the coup de grace. A public statement from Vivienne, quoting the video. Deeply saddened. This behavior is not aligned with Maison Delacroix's values. Family doesn't excuse poor judgment. Travis reposted it with a caption. Leadership requires grace. Praying for growth. I nearly threw my phone across the room. The board meeting was in 4 hours. I didn't even have time to spin this. My first call was to Callum, an old friend from tech media. I didn't bother with small talk. I need the source of a viral video, now. It took him 90 minutes. Brian Nels, remember him? How could I forget? Brian was a digital editor who had once accessed private employee records without clearance. I'd fired him on the spot. No press release, no scandal. Because back then, I still believed in protecting the brand at all costs. Apparently, Travis didn't share that philosophy. He'd brought Brian back 2 months ago, quietly. This is war, I said aloud, more to myself than anyone. I thought back to the day I fired Brian. He'd smirked as I walked him out. You think the truth matters here? He'd hissed. All they'll remember is what they're shown. Now I understood what he meant. That night I met Evelyn at a small quiet cafe in Soho. We sat in the back, hunched over laptops and timelines. We need everything, I said. The original footage, metadata, witness accounts, time-stamped comms. She nodded without hesitation. This was just their warning shot. They're not done. I looked her dead in the eye. Neither am I. By midnight, I was back home. My inbox pinged again. An encrypted message, no sender. There was no text, just a single video file. I hesitated, heart pounding. Clicked play. It was raw security footage, unedited, wide angle. The same scene, but this time it showed everything. The insult that triggered my outburst, my defense of the seamstress, her sobbing gratitude, and at the bottom of the screen, a line of text appeared. Use this wisely. Not everyone on the board is who they seem. Travis poured my coffee like we weren't standing on opposite sides of a battlefield. Rough week, huh? He said, sliding the mug toward me across the table in the company lounge. His tone was light, easy, too easy. You holding up? I forced a nod, studying him for cracks in the mask. Nothing. Just that same effortless charm he wielded in interviews and investor calls. I'm fine, I lied. He leaned in a little. If you need backup, I can talk to a few board members. Smooth things over. You don't have to take this all on yourself. It sounded like support, looked like brotherhood. For a moment, I wanted to believe he meant it. That maybe, just maybe, the boy who once ran beside me through our grandmother's vineyard hadn't grown into a man capable of betrayal. But belief is a dangerous comfort. An hour later, I sat across from Evelyn in her office, watching the color drain from my own face in her monitor's reflection. He's been feeding her everything, she said. The emails were time-stamped, forwarded to an anonymous inbox linked to Vivian's private domain. My moves, my meetings, my words. Travis hadn't just been watching, he'd been reporting. I told him about the archival footage, I whispered. I told him I had a lead. My stomach turned. 16 years ago, I was 10 and desperate for validation. I remember showing Travis my first real sketch, an asymmetrical red dress on notebook paper. He looked at it, smirked, and said, "Cute, but girls with markers don't run companies." The line had buried itself in my bones. I thought he'd grown out of that smug superiority, but it never left. It just evolved, got smarter, smoother. Now it was lethal. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to will away the heat behind my eyes. "I let him in," I said, voice low. "I thought, maybe." Evelyn didn't respond. She just slid a weathered cardboard box across the table. "What's this?" "From the archives. Cleaning team found it behind the old press room. It's his, from back then." Inside, I found sketches, notebooks, a dried-up fountain pen, and a diary. I stared at it for a long time. The weight of it. I shouldn't have read it, but I did. Page after page of resentment, of bitterness disguised as ambition. They keep saying she's gifted, that her eye is like Delacroix herself, but no one sees what I do. She's just a face, a damn legacy costume. I could build 100 things and still be Vivian's son. She gets handed it all for being a granddaughter. I stopped reading. My throat burned. Not from rage, something sadder. I wasn't mourning the betrayal. I was mourning the truth I had denied for too long. He never saw me as his sister. Just a threat. Evelyn reached out, rested her hand over mine. I pulled away. "No more pretending," I said. "He's not my brother in this fight." She nodded. "What's the move?" I opened my notebook and started scribbling. Timelines, connections, leverage points. "If he's playing the long game," I said, "then I'll end it in the short one." Later that night, I sat alone in my office, lights low, the skyline outside glowing like the edge of a blade. I accessed the internal server. For once, his folder wasn't locked. Inside, one file, planb.wav. I hesitated, then clicked. His voice filled the room, confident, casual. "If she doesn't step aside soon, we'll force her hand, one way or another." I didn't blink. We gathered in Evelyn's office, the blinds drawn, door locked. It was the only space left that felt untouched, unwatched. "I've run the math," Maya said, tapping her pen against her notepad. "If we keep Silas and secure Landon's proxy, we can block any surprise vote." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the edge. Silas sat beside her, arms crossed. He hadn't said a word since the meeting started. When I looked at him, he offered nothing. Just a blank, polite smile, one I'd seen too many times from boardroom vultures. "Silas?" I asked. "You still with us?" He gave a faint nod. "Of course." Of course. Like that meant anything anymore. The next morning, everything cracked. A leak hit one of the internal comms channels, an early unofficial vote count from a closed poll. Silas had flipped. The majority had quietly tipped in favor of Travis, just enough to cause chaos. I found Silas in the break lounge, hands deep in a mug of stale coffee. "You switched your vote." He didn't look up. "It's complicated." "No, it's not." "I have responsibilities, Cameron." "To what? Blackmail? Fear? Or just a higher paycheck?" He set the mug down, gaze drifting toward the window. "It's not personal." "It never is," I muttered. "Not until it's your name they rip off the wall." He walked past me, silent. That silence confirmed everything. Later that afternoon, Evelyn burst into my office, laptop in hand. "You need to see this." She'd hacked into a loosely secured account, one of the IT assistants Vivian used on the side. What she found made my stomach turn. There were old email threads, years-old financial statements with Silas's signature tucked beneath questionable numbers. And Vivian's reply? "This wouldn't look good if it ever got out. Let's keep it clean and aligned." He was compromised. She owned him. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, trying not to scream. She's not just cornering board votes. She's gutting whatever decency is left in this place. "She'll take hostages if she has to," Evelyn said. "And she has." I wanted to break something. Instead, I whispered, "She'll destroy anyone who doesn't bend, even if it means burning our name to ash." That night, I stood over Evelyn's drafting table, pen in hand, sketching battle lines instead of gowns. I'm done trying to win hearts. This isn't a PR war, it's trench combat. "If you light that fire," Evelyn said, quiet, "you better be ready to burn with it." I met her eyes. "I already am." The call came just before midnight. "Silas, I didn't want this," he said, his voice barely a rasp. "But you should know, it's not just me." Click. Dead air. I stared at the phone in my hand long after the screen went black. Not just him. How many shadows were sitting at my table? I hadn't stepped into my grandmother's townhouse in almost a decade. The place smelled like time, wood polish, old paper, and lavender that had faded into dust. The silence inside didn't echo. It held its breath. I moved slowly, trailing fingers along the banister where she used to scold me for sliding down. The walls still wore the shadows of her legacy. Framed sketches, press clippings, even a faded Polaroid of her with Evelyn, smiling like co-conspirators. In the study, hidden beneath a stack of unopened mail, I found a sealed envelope. On the front, her unmistakable handwriting, "For the one who carries this forward." Inside were blueprints, not for fashion, but for survival. Corporate documents, character assessments, a list of allies. Evelyn's name was there, underlined twice, and one line stood out, scribbled in the margins. If Vivian strays from principle, she must be stopped by blood, not business. It wasn't a warning. It was a command. Evelyn met me later that evening with something of her own, a small tin box from her storage unit, dented at the corners. I kept this after she fired me. I knew it would matter one day. Inside were original contracts, documents Vivian had doctored or destroyed after Evelyn refused to approve a shady overseas acquisition. The ink had aged, but the signatures were clear. This was her beginning, Evelyn said. She learned how to erase people by starting with me. I stared at the evidence, breath caught in my throat. She's been rewriting the story for years, I whispered, and banking on the rest of us forgetting how it really went. My anger shifted, no longer just a heat, but a pressure, like something volcanic beneath my ribs. My mother hadn't simply tried to remove me from the company, she had rewritten history, burning every bridge behind her so no one could follow. "I'll testify," Evelyn said, voice soft but unshaking. "If this gets me dragged through hell again, so be it. I owed your grandmother more than silence." Later that night, I requested a meeting with Vivian. She granted me 10 minutes in her office, sipping red wine like it was part of her inheritance. "You tried to erase her," I said. "You tried to erase me. But the one you left in the dark is the one who turned on the light." She didn't flinch, but her eyes flicked, just for a moment. "You're playing with matches in a house built of silk," she said. "Don't be surprised when it burns." I met her gaze without blinking. "Then I'll be the one holding the extinguisher." Back at my place, a text buzzed in. No number, no sender. Just an attachment, a PDF file named Inheritance Nullification Notice Draft. I opened it. Legal jargon, firm letterhead, a blank signature line beside Vivian's name. My name was nowhere in the body of the document. I stared at it long after my hands stopped shaking. She wasn't bluffing anymore. She was drawing the knife. The message came just after dawn. 2 of our biggest collaborators were pulling out. No warning, no calls. Just a sterile press release about strategic repositioning. By noon, a second email landed in my inbox. No subject line, just a forwarded message from my head of PR, flagged urgent. Attached was a screenshot of a private exchange, Vivian, in her perfectly clipped tone, telling a group of industry executives I was emotionally volatile and a branding risk. This wasn't business. It was exile. She wasn't just trying to beat me. She was trying to erase me. I walked into our prearranged peace luncheon that afternoon prepared to keep my voice level, but Vivian was already sipping her martini. One eyebrow lifted in amusement before I even sat down. "You don't need to keep pretending this is strategy," I said. "You're trying to humiliate me." She didn't blink. "I'm not trying. I'm succeeding." The sting hit sharper because I recognized that smile. It was the same one she wore when she told me, at 16, that entering the Parsons Design Invitational would be bad optics for the family. 16 years ago. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the acceptance letter with trembling fingers. Vivian walked in, eyes narrowed. "You'll embarrass yourself," she said. "Leave that to the girls who need attention." And like a fool, I withdrew. Back in the present, she dabbed her lip with a napkin and said, "You were never meant to carry this, Cameron, and the world agrees with me." That night, Evelyn arranged a meeting. "He's a shark, but he hates your mother more than he likes his own reflection," she whispered. We met Lionel Duarte in the back of a members-only club in Soho. The man exuded ego, but it was earned. He'd built an e-commerce empire from scratch before Vivian publicly buried his last acquisition attempt. "I've been waiting to watch that woman eat her own spin," he said, pouring scotch. I laid it out. I needed public support, visibility, legitimacy. In exchange, I'd integrate his brand into Maison Delacroix's digital relaunch if I held my seat. He leaned forward. "You win this war, you better be ready to run the kingdom." "I'm not just ready," I said. "I was raised for it." That same night, I posted a message, short, sharp, and pointed. They told me silence would protect the legacy, but the silence was the betrayal. The response was immediate. Hundreds of shares, thousands of comments. Former interns, forgotten seamstresses, junior assistants from the archives, they all began speaking, not about me, but about Vivian, about the fear, the cold cuts, the backdoor deals. The whisper network became a chorus. By midnight, a courier arrived, no note, just a sealed folder. Inside, one typed sentence on company letterhead, "Prepare for the vote." They should have listened. I warned them, Vivian and Travis both. I told them there was a line, and they were dancing on it like it wasn't wired to explode. But they laughed, dismissed me, mocked me as emotional, overmatched. That was before I found the clause. It was buried deep, hidden under footnotes in an old estate document no one had bothered to revisit since the funeral. My new attorney flagged it, his voice flat with disbelief. "This changes everything." The clause was simple, brutal, elegant. If any heir ascended through coercion or fraud, they forfeited all rights to inheritance, control, even company shares. My grandmother didn't just build an empire, she built a trap, one that only springs if someone gets greedy. Travis had gotten greedy. Still, a clause means nothing without proof, and proof means blood. Evelyn didn't knock when she came into my office later that day. She dropped a file on the table like a loaded weapon. "You're going to want to sit down," she said. I opened the folder, emails, HR logs, metadata, and then there it was, a scanned document supposedly signed by my grandmother, transferring proxy authority to Travis under her full consent. The problem? The signature didn't match. I'd spent a lifetime watching my grandmother sign everything from sketches to billion-dollar deals. This wasn't her hand. We brought in a forensic analyst. I waited 2 sleepless nights before the report came back. Forged, undeniably. He forged her signature. "He didn't just want power," I said to Evelyn, my throat dry. "He committed fraud to bury me alive." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I stood at the window, the Manhattan skyline stretching before me, glittering like a lie. 16 years ago. I was 10, sitting outside Vivian's office while Travis spoke inside. I leaned in close enough to hear. "She's too soft," he said. "You let her in too close, she'll ruin the brand." "And Vivian?" She said nothing, just poured tea. The rot started long before this war. I turned back to Evelyn. "We bring this public. He doesn't just lose the vote. He goes down hard." "Are you ready for what that means?" she asked. "No one's coming out of this clean," I said, "so I might as well come out powerful." Later that evening, I held the dossier tight, walking toward the boardroom. The lights were low, the air conditioned and clinical. Every chair at the long glass table sat perfectly pushed in, like they were waiting for a funeral procession to start. I placed the file on the table. Behind me, a voice, smooth, mocking. "You're too late. The vote's already scheduled." I didn't even turn around. "Good," I said, loud enough for the shadows to hear. "I hope they're all watching." The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than usual, each second a measured drumbeat in my chest. As the doors parted, the silence on the executive level hit me like a gust of sterile air. The Maison Delacroix boardroom loomed ahead, its glass walls gleaming with manufactured neutrality. But inside, the storm was waiting. I entered first. Vivian sat at the head of the table, poised like a monarch, her lips curled in a smirk that barely masked contempt. Travis, leaning back with a practiced air of boredom, tapped his fingers against the wood grain. Maya, bless her, looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Let's begin, shall we?" I said, voice steady. No tremble, no invitation for pity. Vivian wasted no time. "We're here today to confirm the transition of leadership," she started, her tone syrupy, fake. Actually, I cut in, sliding a folder across the table. We're here to address a crime. Travis scoffed. What now? Another tantrum in the guise of litigation? I ignored him. The signature authorizing your claim, I said, eyes fixed on him, is forged, forensically confirmed. Maya's brow furrowed. Murmurs swelled across the room. And that's not all. I opened a second file. Here's the hidden clause from my grandmother's will. Any heir who gains control through deceit loses everything. Vivian sat back, arms crossed. You're grasping. No, I said, leaning in. I'm ending this. The room held its breath as I laid out the final blow. Bank records, email chains, board member communications. Silas wouldn't meet my eyes. Maya reached for the documents, reading each line like they were lit fuses. I trusted you, I said to the room, and you sold her legacy for leverage. Vivian opened her mouth to respond, but Evelyn walked in, silent as a storm, carrying a laptop. Cameron, she nodded. May I? I gestured to the center. Evelyn connected the laptop. The room lights dimmed as the screen flickered to life, and then the live stream began. Footage rolled, Travis in his office, pacing. She's not backing down, he muttered on camera. We may need to move forward with Plan B. Then another clip, Vivian whispering into her phone. Get Silas to vote. I don't care how. Remind him what we have on him. Gasps. Someone at the table cursed under their breath. Evelyn stood expressionless, the weight of years carried on her shoulders. And then the bribes. Whispered promises. Digital trails. All of it, raw and live, broadcast across the company's internal network. Screens around the building lit up, employees watching in stunned silence. Travis lunged for the laptop. Security stopped him mid-step. The room turned on him like wolves catching scent of fear. He looked at me then. No more smugness, no more polish. Just the wide, terrified eyes of a man unmasked. You wanted a show of power, I said softly. Well, here's your legacy. Broadcast in shame. Vivian didn't move. Her mask of superiority cracked, lips parted, no words left. Maya stood. Emergency vote, she declared. Now. I didn't flinch. When it ended, the room stayed still. Maya looked to me. You ready to take your seat, CEO Delaney? I exhaled. Let's finish what my grandmother started. The boardroom was still. No words, no shuffling papers, just the quiet thrum of the city far below. I sat at the head of the table, finally. The leather seat was colder than I expected. Not triumphant, not rewarding, just earned. The chairs to my left and right, once occupied by Vivian and Travis, sat vacant. Their absence hung heavier than their presence ever did. No applause, no closure, just air filled with memory and everything unsaid. I thought of the first time I watched my grandmother sketch, a soft hum on her lips, hands stained with charcoal, sleeves rolled to the elbows. She never explained anything. She just let me watch, let me understand. The cameras were gone now, the storm of flashbulbs muted behind tinted glass. But outside, the media was still circling. Headlines screamed about betrayal, empire wars, forged signatures. Investors needed comfort. Staff needed direction. A legacy needed resurrection. Maison Delacroix will not fall, I told the press. But it will change. Evelyn stood beside me, calm as always. You need to do more than repair. You need to reimagine. She proposed a healing initiative, one built around my grandmother's forgotten dream, to support immigrant fashion students and women entrepreneurs. I agreed without hesitation. Purpose didn't need polish. That afternoon, I visited the same retirement center my grandmother used to fund anonymously. They showed me old photos, students smiling, her arm around them, eyes sparkling with quiet pride. I fought for power, I whispered to no one. But legacy. Legacy is something else. Later that week, I drove to Vivian's estate. No reporters, no security. Just a daughter trying to speak. She didn't come to the door. The gates never opened. I left a letter in the box. You built this place from pain. I'm building from purpose. I never heard back. Travis surfaced in a tabloid. Gray suit wrinkled, face down, leaving a courthouse alone. No charges yet. But the weight of shame was doing its own sentencing. At HQ, Maya placed a small velvet box on my desk. She wanted this passed on when the time was right. Inside was my grandmother's ring, and a folded note in her handwriting. Power is given. Respect is earned. Legacy must be chosen. I slipped the ring onto my finger. We launched a new initiative the next day, Maison Forward, a fund for women-led sustainable fashion. Not because it made good PR, because it was the right thing to do. That night, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in my office, watching the city lights scatter across the river. I whispered to the silence. I won the boardroom, but I lost a mother. The room echoed nothing back. I turned to my desk, sat down. A ping. One new email. From Vivian Dulaney. Subject: I wasn't finished. Looking back, if there's one truth I carry from this war, it's that silence is not peace. Sometimes standing your ground doesn't mean yelling the loudest. It means refusing to be erased. Refusing to let anyone rewrite your story. If you're navigating your own family conflict, chasing legacy, or trying to build something that matters, remember this: power can be taken, but purpose is yours to choose, every single day. I've learned that healing doesn't always come wrapped in apologies. Sometimes it arrives through clarity, through courage, through choosing to be the first one who breaks the cycle. What about you? Have you ever had to fight for something that was yours by right, but questioned your own worth along the way? I'd love to hear your story. If this video touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me what city you're watching from. If it didn't speak to you, tell me why. I welcome it all. That's how we grow. And if you want to hear more real, raw, and deeply personal stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay connected. This journey's just beginning.